So welcome everybody to this latest video looking at KS3 and GCSE maths, and in this video we'll be focusing on bearings. Now bearings describes magnitude, in other words distance, and direction, which is an angle of one point to another. Now in simple terms we can describe direction using compass points and relate these points to the angles, with north being 0 degrees. So if north is 0 degrees, then that would mean east would be 90 degrees, south would be 180 degrees, and west would be 270 degrees, going in a clockwise direction, which is again another important aspect to look at. So that means that northeast will be 45 degrees, because that's halfway between 0 and 90. Southeast would be 135, as that's between 90 and 180. Southwest would be 225, because that's a number that's between 180 and 270. And finally northwest would be 350 degrees, as that's between 360 and 270. Now this is certainly one thing that I would strongly recommend that you do write in your notes, because sometimes the bearings could be given as an angle or it could be given as a compass point, and it's important that you learn to memorize or at least acknowledge how to calculate the angle given a compass point. Now to keep things consistent, there are three main rules of bearings, and this is certainly something that I would definitely make a note of. Now the first point is that all points need to start from north. So whenever you deal with a bearings question, always make sure that you draw a north line, and in some cases that north line would be already drawn for you. Now the second point is you always go in a clockwise direction. So clockwise, again you just need to look at a clock, which usually you find in a classroom, but it's always going in this direction, never anti-clockwise. And the third rule is that you always give angles as a 3-digit number. So for example, if you had an angle of 45 degrees, then that would be written as 045 degrees. If you had 6 degrees, that would be 006 degrees. You tend not to have decimal angles, so you wouldn't have like 36.4, because again, with a protractor or with any sort of standard angle measurer, you're not going to go into that much detail. So usually it will be a rounded number, and again just give your answer or your angle as a 3-digit number. Now in terms of some top tips, let's just go through these. So the first one is always learn and remember the 3 rules. So the first rule is whenever you get a point, always draw a north line if one hasn't been done for you. Always go in the clockwise direction. Always write your angles as a 3-digit number. The second one is always draw a diagram if one hasn't been drawn for you. So again, you tend to find these in more textbook questions because there's no room, but you generally find that a diagram will be drawn for you, but if it isn't, then always do one yourself. This third one is learn the compass points and their respective angles. So again, what we did at the start of the video of north being 0, always 0, south being 180, east being 90 degrees, west being 270, and then you've got the northeast, southeast, etc. The fourth one is one really important, so make sure you read the questions carefully. Know which point you were starting at and which you are ending at. So for example, if you have a statement that says Derby to Birmingham, then that means you're starting in Derby and ending in Birmingham. If you had a question that was written like Derby from Birmingham, that means you're starting from Birmingham and ending Derby. So don't automatically think that the first thing that's mentioned is where you start and the second is where you finish, because it all depends on the wording of itself. And the fifth one is always use your common sense. So if a bearing from your diagram is acute, then expect an answer that is less than 90 degrees. If it's obtuse, expect an answer between 90 and 180, and if it's reflex, expect an answer that's between 180 and 360. So again, although your angles may not be sort of accurate on a diagram because it may not be drawn to scale, they're never going to be that where if it looks like an acute angle, you expect an acute angle. It may not be look 60 or 70 degrees or 110 or 108, let's say 170, but it will definitely be either acute, obtuse or reflex in the diagram and with the answer. So let's have a look at an example. So here we've got the bearing of, and we've been asked to work out the bearing of A to B and A from B. Now with regards to the first one, let's just use an element of colour. Now what I would always recommend that you do is you draw a straight line, a connecting line from the 2 points. So for example, I've got point A and I've got point B. I'm just going to colour that in black. So in terms of the first one, now the first one I'm going to do in blue. So let's just colour code these. So I'm starting at A and I'm going to B. So starting at A, going to B, it's going to be this angle. So this is the angle that I need to measure. So that there is number 1, and it's a sort of obtuse angle, and I would measure this angle accurately. I measure with a protractor or angle measurer. Now, in terms of the second one, which I'm just going to do in green, this is going from starting at B and ending at A. So again, I'm going to start with my north line. I'm going to go in a clockwise direction, and it's this angle here that I need to measure. Now, this angle here is a reflex angle. So I'm expecting an answer that's bigger than 180 but smaller than 360, and this is the angle that I would then need to measure. Now, if you've got a protractor, then obviously a protractor can only measure 180. So there's several ways you can do this. You can either draw a straight vertical line and know that this is 180. So all you need to do is add it to whatever this angle is, and add this angle to 180, and I would get the total. Alternately, you could divide the angle going this way, in which this blue part would be 180, and I would then measure what this angle here is, and again you should end up with the same answer, but your answer definitely there will be a reflex angle. And so let's have a look at another one. So again, the first thing I'm going to do is draw a connecting line from those 2 points, so from C to D. And again, looking at what the question's asking me, it's to tell me to start at C and go to D. So it's this angle here. I'll just color code it, change the color of the line. So in terms of the first question, which I'm just going to highlight in blue, it's this angle here that I need to measure. When it comes from C from D, well, that's going to be this angle here is the one that I need to measure. And again, I'm not going to sort of get a protractor because obviously it's a bit difficult on screen, but as long as you know which angles you need to measure, then that is going to be fine. And again, I'm abiding by the 3 rules. I'm starting from north, I'm going in a clockwise direction, and I'm going to write my answer as a 3-digit number. And likewise for the second one, it's this angle here that I need to measure. Now, if an angle is marked, you don't necessarily need to use a protractor or angle measurer to find the angle. So for example, in this diagram, it's not been drawn to scale because it says it there, and we know that this angle from Derby to Nottingham is 72 degrees. Now, in an exam paper, this may be given, and we can't use a protractor to measure what this angle, which is what we've been asked to find. Now, what I need to do is I can use my common sense or use my knowledge of angles, and knowing that if I extend this line, then this angle here will also be 72 degrees. Why? Because it is a corresponding angle. It's like an F angle. Now, if you're not sure about what I mean with corresponding angles, there is another video that looks at angles on parallel lines, because these 2 north lines are going to be parallel. And so from an F angle, or what we properly call a corresponding angle, that those 2 angles are going to be the same. Now from that, I know that this angle here, because it's a straight line, is going to add up to 180. So the bearing of Nottingham to Derby is going to be 72 plus 180, which gives me an answer of 252 degrees. Now, does this angle look correct? Well, yes. Reasons why is because it is a reflex angle. So it's this angle that I need to find, and there is my final answer. Now, as mentioned, back bearings are when you are told one direction and you need to work out the bearing of the reverse action. So for example, let's just say that the bearing of A to B is, let's say, 60 degrees. And we want to work out what this back bearing here is going to be. Now, obviously one way of kind of incorporating what we've already done is that this back bearing of, so if A to B is equal to 60 degrees, then B to A is going to be 180 plus 60, and that gives me 240 degrees. So basically you're adding 180. Now, if let's say we were given bearing of B to A, so let's just make up an answer. Let's go for 210 degrees. So if B to A was equal to 210, then well, let's just then A to B, which is this bearing here, is going to be 210 minus 180. So In some cases, for a back bearing, you're either going to add 180 or you're going to take it away from 180. And this is where having a diagram, using your common sense and understanding what type of answer you're going to be expecting can make your life a little bit easier. So when you're doing back bearings, you're either going to add 180 if your angle is going to be a sort of an obtuse or a reflex angle, and you are going to be taking away 180 if your answer, the information given to you, is either a reflex or acute angle, and you need to work out the acute angle.